August 4th, man, I just remember when every night I was getting on here saying July. That's crazy. But I already got my July analytics. So, of course, August 4th, 2025 on a Monday. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Cozy Corner TV. I am your host, Kieran Smith. Call me Q, and we're back on the corner. Welcome to the daily live stream, you guys. I hope Monday has been well to you thus far. All right, so late night Monday, but nonetheless, recovering from the sister's wedding weekend, which was this past uh, Saturday was the wedding. Yes. So I didn't talk about it too much leading up to it with you guys. So it was just kind of, you didn't see me on like a Saturday when you always would, and then I was kind of back and I'm like, oh my bad. So, well, I think it was Friday, but it was either the day before, after the wedding, I think it was, and it's like it was pretty crazy. So a lot of family in town, but nonetheless, sister is married. Congratulations to her and her new husband. Okay, guys, so we're gonna jump right into this live stream because I got a couple clips. Some of them are short, not too long. I think the longest one I got going tonight is probably 11 minutes, and we're not even gonna watch that whole thing because I literally thought it was ridiculous. Yeah, it's this one with Hakeem Jeffries. So, but we're gonna take a look at it just for the sake of the first topic on the menu tonight. Really, we're gonna take a look at a lot of this redistricting news. So we have a lot of representatives that are actually fleeing their states to kind of avoid this redistricting that's happening. So I think one, two, three, my first three clips, hands down, are about this redistricting thing that's happening. First up, we got New York Post. Shout out to them. Texas House Dems push back. Not only are we going to punch back, but we are about to beat you down. So that would be no one other than the famous Jasmine Crockett. So we'll take a look at her talk about that. We'll switch gears and go over to Representative Jeffries. That would be Hakeem Jeffries of the Democrats, the minority leader. He covered Leader Jeffries on CNN's The Situation Room. So he talks kind of about, really, I don't like the way he answered the questions because he didn't really answer them great, but that's not surprising. With Hakeem Jeffries, the guy asks him about redistricting. He goes to President Trump and groceries not being low and things like this. And it's like, no, man, talk about why you guys are fleeing your state because you're trying to avoid this whole redistricting thing, which I think literally is kind of insane. But we'll take a look at that. On ABC, this is actually on their website. Shout out to ABC. We have rising Democratic star, Texas exit. Rising Democratic star leads Texas exodus over voting map dispute. So this would be James Tallarico. This is the guy who was on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan told him he should run for president. Fairly young guy, politician and pastor, which I think is an interesting combination. So we're gonna keep an eye on James. Then we're gonna switch gears and we're gonna go over to CNN, talk a little bit about what's going on with Obama and Russiagate and the Russia instigation. We have source Bondi orders grand jury probe into Obama officials over Russia investigation. So a grand jury probe is not a small thing, right? You can spend some time proving your innocence just when you have grand jury probes. But we're gonna take a look at that and see what they're talking about there. We're gonna have to keep following this because, as I said, I don't think a lot of this will amount to much. I had Ben Shapiro also. We looked at one of his videos that we reacted to as to why, just because the president's executive power. But we're still going to follow it and see what comes out of it. We're going to go over to Bill O'Reilly. Shout out to him. What is Kamala Harris talking about? Bill O'Reilly blasts the former VP and Stephen Colbert. So Kamala Harris was on Stephen Colbert's show, and yeah, she just talked about a lot of capitulating when it comes to President Trump and that she prepared for a lot, but she didn't prepare for the capitulation. So, Bill O'Reilly made a great point. He said, any good interviewer would have asked, well, Madam Vice President, could you please give me some examples? He's like, but we can't expect that from Stephen Colbert. So that's Bill O'Reilly we'll take a look at. And then we'll go over to, shout out to WION, J.D. Vance surging ahead in Republican Party's 2028 nomination race. This is interesting because they kind of asked Marco Rubio a question about him running for president, and he deflected right to J.D. Vance, which I thought it was a decent move because Marco Rubio still has the space to run for president if he wants to. But nonetheless, he says, I think JD is a great candidate. So we'll take a look at that. Some people are like, well, President Trump still has 4 years, so we shouldn't be thinking about this. And I'm just like, he doesn't have 4 years. He had 4 years in 2024. He no longer has 4 years. But nonetheless, people don't realize how fast time flies. So we're gonna jump into the first clip of the live stream, guys. Let's take a listen to this. We have Texas House Dems push back. Not only are we going to punch back, but we about to beat you down. Here we go. It's Jasmine Crockett for us. All right, guys, let's take a listen.
Let me tell you something. I want to make sure that I make it clear who these people that are standing behind me are. Because I don't think that the American people truly understand the amount of sacrifice that these warriors and heroes are making right now. Most people don't understand that in the Texas House, you only get paid $7,000 as it is as a salary.
Crazy word.
But these people are saying, listen, we are going to do our job because we understand our oath, unlike those that serve on the federal level and are Republicans, as well as those that serve in our current Supreme Court and happen to have been appointed by Republicans, as well as those that serve in the Texas House right now and happen to be Republicans. These are people that understand what it is to be a representative. They understand their constituencies, and instead of trying to stomp on them, they want to do everything that they can to stomp for them. And so that's why they're here. Now let me say, this governor talks a lot of noise, and I made sure that I put up my warrant from 4 years ago to make the claim that they talk a lot of noise, but these guys are weak. That's why they're over here trying to bully people. Bullies are always weak. The difference is they expect Democrats to kind of be the nice guys that we are. They expect us to take the punch and say thank you. Well, I am here to tell you not only are we going to punch back, but we're about to beat you down. That's right. Yeah. We're going to win. I'm going to tell you why we're going to win, because people are tired. And as it's already been said, we got a few truth tellers that came before us.
Horizon GTAG, shout out to you.
That maybe you haven't learned these amazing warriors' names, but you will know their names.
KVTRG, shout out to you.
Got my training ground right there in Texas. We know that there was another amazing black woman out of the state of Texas by the name of Barbara Jordan that had to check another corrupt president by the name of Nixon. So I'm here to tell you, just like I told a group of folk in Arizona yesterday. Frankie Beverly and Mays said it best. We are one. For everyone that's been asking, where are the Democrats? Well, here they are. For everyone that's been asking, where is the fight? Well, here it is. But let me tell you something. Don't leave them out on a ledge by themselves. They need to know that you, the American people, stand with them because they are standing for you. There's so many people that they will never meet, but they understand the importance of making sure that they have a voice when it comes to their government. They understand the importance of standing for what democracy is and making sure that it does not fall by the wayside. They understand that we have a Timmu Hitler in the White House right now that thinks that he is going to become the dictator of the United States. Well, I got another thing to tell you, sir. The Democrats, no matter whether we're talking about these Texas House Democrats, or whether we're talking about the governor from Illinois, the governor from California, or whether we're talking about New York, or I can go through the states, and it's not just the governors. It is the state houses. It is the state senators. It is those congressional delegations that are saying, do what you got to do, and I will fight, and I will win, and I will earn my seat back to the people's house in D.C. I am here to tell you that time is up for playing in our faces. The Democrats are not going to stand for this any longer. We know that we are standing for the people. And so long as we stand for the people, I absolutely believe the people are going to stand for us. So I just want to be clear. Do whatever you can to support these heroes. Because they are the ones that have to leave their families. They are the ones that have warrants out for their arrest. They are the ones that are doing things that, honestly, a lot of other people do not have the audacity to do. So make sure when you talk about them, press, put some respect on their names.
Put some respect on their names. All right, guys. So we're gonna just keep going because this is all through the whole redistricting news. So that was Jasmine Crockett talking about some of the people, or some of the representatives in Texas right now who are fighting back, quote unquote, per the Democrats, against what they believe President Trump has put in place to rig elections. So that's what they believe this whole redistricting thing is. So we're just gonna move right along and go to Representative Jeffries. Here we got Hakeem Jeffries. Shout out to Representative Jeffries, aka Brandon Lehman. I was in Brandon Lehman's birthday live stream. Shout out to Brandon Lehman today, who I got the name. What is it? Walmart Obama. I was like, what? The first time I heard that. But I will say this: the more that you follow Hakeem Jeffries and you pay attention to him, the name is pretty deserving, and that's the sad thing about it. It's pretty deserving. But nonetheless, some people like him. I don't hate the guy. I do not like the way he answers questions. Sometimes I do feel like he goes in circles and around and word salad, and I'm like, come on, Hakeem, answer the question. But we're going to take a look at this. I think we're probably going to go 8 minutes in, because that's about where I stopped and where I was like, okay, enough's enough. But nonetheless, it talks about Texas redistricting. We got 38 districts here. Leader Jeffries on CNN's The Situation Room. Representative Hakeem Jeffries on Democratic efforts to block Texas redistricting. Let's take a listen.
Joining us now to discuss this and more, the House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries of New York. Leader Jeffries, thanks so much for joining us. I know you recently traveled to Austin, Texas, to meet with the Democratic lawmakers there about this redistricting proposal. We've seen Texas Democrats try to use these quorum breaks before, only for them to fail, like back in 2003 and then in 2021. How will this time be any different?
Well, in the 2021 quorum break, actually, I would argue that Texas Democrats were successful in forcing Republicans to walk away from some of the more extreme parts of the voter suppression law that were being contemplated at the time. They still moved forward with their efforts to try to suppress the possibility of a free and fair election in Texas. This is what they do. But the Texas Democrats were successful in reducing the extreme nature of what was being proposed. But this moment does require an extraordinary response, because this is an extraordinary act that Republicans have been ordered to undertake to try to gerrymander the Texas congressional map as part of an effort to rig the midterm elections. Well, that's what this is all about, because Donald Trump, House Republicans, and the Texas Republican Party, they're all running scared because they have failed the American people.
The Texas governor, as you know, Leader Jeffries, we're talking about Greg Abbott. He's threatened to remove Texas House Democrats who actually left the state from their positions because it quote, amounts to an abandonment, he says, or forfeiture of elected state office. Governor Abbott also says Texas Democrats may have violated what he calls bribery laws. How do you respond to all this?
The Republican governor of Texas is out of his mind. There is no basis to charge these House Texas Democrats who have refused righteously to, at the moment, vote on an extraordinary map that would hurt their constituents that they are privileged and sworn to represent right now. Governor Abbott is making idle threats. He is all hat, no cattle.
As you know, Leader Jeffries, these Texas Democrats they've traveled to several Democratic-controlled states, including your state of New York. That's where Governor Kathy Hochul only moments ago said she's exploring, quote, and I'm quoting her now, every option to redraw our state congressional lines as soon as possible. But listen to what she exactly said. Listen to this.
I'm tired of fighting this fight with my hand tied behind my back. With all due respect.
Yeah,
to
14,
governors,
I know.
Politics is a political process. And to think that we're going to do this with a purity test, but I cannot ignore that the playing field has changed dramatically. And shame on us if we ignore that fact and cling tight to the vestiges of the past. That era is over. Donald Trump eliminated that forever.
And as you know, Leader Jeffries, more Republican states are now looking at potentially engaging in this redistricting as well. Do you worry this could be a never-ending cycle of redistricting across the entire country?
First of all, Wolf, we appreciate the strong leadership being shown by Governor Kathy Hochul, Governor Gavin Newsom, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and governors all across the country, because this is an unprecedented moment that America and the world find ourselves in at this particular period of time. Donald Trump and the Republican Party have launched an all-out, unprecedented assault on the...
You see what he's doing? Look, the guy didn't ask him none of this stuff. This is where Hakeem Jeffries could drive me crazy. Right here. Look at the question he gets asked and look at how he starts.
And as you know, Leader Jeffries, more Republican states are now looking at potentially engaging in this redistricting as well. Do you worry this could be a never-ending cycle of redistricting across the entire country?
First of all, Wolf, we appreciate the strong leadership being shown by
Yes or
Governor
no?
Kathy Hochul, Governor Gavin Newsom, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and governors all across the country, because this is an unprecedented moment that America and the world find ourselves in at this particular period of time. Donald Trump and the Republican Party have launched an all-out, unprecedented assault on the economy, on health care, on veterans, on farmers, on everyday Americans, on the rule of law, on law-abiding immigrant families, and of course on democracy itself. It's an all-hands-on-deck moment for us. That means House Democrats, Senate Democrats, Democratic governors, Democratic members of the state legislature, Democratic attorney generals, but most importantly, the American people. All of us need to show up and stand up and speak up for an America actually that is enlightened and inclusive and lifts people up, as opposed to the America that we're in right now, where Donald Trump and Republicans are determined to tear people down.
Oh, okay. That's all
When
they're
you were in
doing.
Austin, Texas, Leader Jeffries, last week, you argued that Texas Republicans, in your words, at the urging of President Donald Trump, were trying to rig elections by allowing politicians to choose their own voters through this redistricting proposal. What do you say to the argument that Democrats would be guilty of the same charge if they gerrymandered in so-called blue states, Democratic-led states?
What Democrats would be doing in response is to make sure that there is one fair national map, so that the people of this country...
Sweet. You argued that Texas Republicans, in your words, at the urging of President Donald Trump, were trying to rig elections by allowing politicians to choose their own voters through this redistricting proposal.
Okay.
What do you say to the argument that Democrats would be guilty of the same charge if they gerrymandered in so-called blue states, Democratic-led states?
Yeah, they would be
What
doing the same
Democrats
thing,
would
right?
be doing in response is to make sure that there is one fair national map,
Oh, here we
so
go.
that the people of this country will have the opportunity to make a decision in November of next year.
Okay, so when the Democrats do it, it's so they can make sure that there's one national fair map. That's according to Hakeem Jeffries. But because the Republicans are doing it or initiating it, it has to be because they're trying to take the Senate. They're trying to keep the Senate. It couldn't be because no other reason. This is what can drive me a little crazy about Mr. Jeffries.
In deciding who should actually serve in the majority in the United States House of Representatives. We think that Republicans are scared to death that they are on the brink of losing the House of Representatives. This one big ugly bill that they
Scared to
passed
death,
into
huh?
law rips away health care from the American people, steals food from the mouths of children, hurts everyday Americans in order to reward their billionaire donors with massive tax breaks, and they've broken their fundamental promise to lower the high cost of living. Costs aren't going down in America, costs are going up. Job creation is going down and unemployment is going up as Donald Trump and Republicans are crashing the economy in real time. We're not afraid as Democrats to make our case to the American people that we will lower the high cost of living. We will fix our broken healthcare system.
You had a
We will
chance to
clean
do
up
that.
corruption so we can deliver a government that actually works for the American people and is not a government of the billionaires by
You
the
had a
billionaires
chance to
and
do
for
that,
the billionaires.
Hakeem.
We're prepared to take that case directly to the American people. Republicans are trying to rig the congressional maps because they don't want to have this fight on the merits.
Well, I have you, Leader Jeffries. I want to turn to another important subject. Your counterpart in the U.S. Senate, Chuck Schumer, man, you know well, earlier this morning he called for the firing of the White House National Economic Council Director, Kevin Hassett, after Hassett defended President Donald Trump's decision to axe the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics following the other day's very disappointing jobs report. Do you think Hassett should be fired?
I don't think Hassett is qualified to be part of this administration, but that in fact is the case as it relates to so many members of the Trump administration. This is the most unqualified administration in American history, which is why the whole thing is a disaster. They failed to make life better for the American people. In fact, they're making life worse, making life more expensive. These Trump tariffs, these Republican-backed tariffs, are increasing costs on everyday Americans by thousands of dollars per year. And now you see the job market collapsing in the country, Trump continuing to destabilize our economic system, and they're driving us toward a recession. All of them are unqualified to be serving the American people right now.
On another sensitive issue, while I have you, Congressman, on the war between Israel and Hamas and the worsening crisis unfolding in Gaza right now, your Democratic colleague, Congressman Ro Khanna of California, is now circulating a letter urging the White House to recognize a Palestinian state. Are you open to signing on to that?
I haven't seen the letter or talked to Ro, but here's what I'll say about the situation. The humanitarian crisis right now is unconscionable, and we've got to surge humanitarian aid and food into Gaza to prevent starvation from children and innocent civilians who have been suffering in this war zone. At the same period of time, we've got to make sure that we can get every single hostage out and returned to their families in Israel, and we need to restore the ceasefire that Donald Trump inherited from Joe Biden, but has allowed to be broken, so that we can establish a permanent path toward a just and lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinian people. And the only way to actually achieve that with some permanence is to make sure that there's a two-state solution. A safe and secure Israel living side by side with a Palestinian state that allows the Palestinian people to pursue and experience dignity, prosperity, and self-determination.
And you think that's possible with Hamas?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Leader Jeffries, that you would support a U.S. decision to support a new independent Palestinian state.
What I support is a two-state solution that has to be negotiated by all parties. But what we have to do right now is to make sure the ceasefire is restored, that humanitarian assistance is surged and sustained into Gaza. There's an ongoing crisis right now. That has to be dealt with, and of course we have to get the hostages returned. But we all have to commit ourselves to a legitimate, robust, authentic process of bringing a just and lasting peace to the region. And the only way to achieve that, in my view, is a two-state solution. Israel and a Palestinian state, that has to be negotiated. United States leadership will be required in order to bring that about.
All right, the House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York, thanks as usual for joining us. We always appreciate having you here in this situation.
Theo's father, shout out to you, Theo.
Thank you all.
Hit that like button. That's for stopping by. Shout out to Theo. You guys hear my dogs in the background going crazy? All right, so that was Mr. Jeffries on his thoughts. Listen, like I said, this is the thing that could drive me crazy about Hakeem Jeffries. He can seem so back and forth. Like, he can't be congruent, and it just drives me a little bit crazy about him. I'm just saying. All right, guys, shout out to ABC News. We're switching gears. Here we have rising Democratic star leads Texas exodus over voting maps dispute. So this is Representative James Tallarico. This is the gentleman who was on the Joe Rogan podcast, who Joe Rogan said, you should run for president. Fairly young gentleman. Politician and pastor, representative out of Texas on the Democratic side. Very well-spoken gentleman. He articulates himself well. I think he's very well put together. But from what I understand, a lot of people think he is very underrated. Like he should be further than what he is. So let's take a listen to what he has to say about this whole Democratic exodus happening.
After that Texas redistricting battle we told you about earlier, Democratic members of the Texas House of Representatives fleeing that state trying to thwart a vote on new congressional maps that would favor Republicans. My next guest is one of those members who has left. Texas State Representative James Tallarico. He joins me now from not Texas, but Illinois. Representative Tallarico, welcome in. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So Governor Abbott is saying that you and your colleagues who have now fled the state should be removed from your seats. The Attorney General has said that you should potentially be arrested, and we haven't even heard yet from President Trump, who could also weigh in on all of this. Are you concerned about the consequences that you and some of your fellow Texas Democrats could face here?
Well, we didn't make this decision lightly. We knew there would be retaliation from the likes of Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton. They are trying to silence the voices of our constituents. They're trying to silence the voices of all Texans, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, by redrawing these Texas political maps in the middle of the decade to rig the upcoming election, to manufacture the outcome they want, and insulate themselves from the will of the public, from accountability, from consequences. And so we knew that this was going to be a major step, but we feel it is necessary to protect our constituents, protect Texans, and honestly to protect all Americans, because this is not just a Texas problem, this affects the whole country.
So there isn't.
So in James' defense, here's what I can appreciate about him. He was the only representative that said something to the effect that he feels like this is unfair and why it might be motivationally charged in a way is because it's being done in the middle of the decade. So he's going to talk about this in a little bit, but he's saying that this was already done in 2021. So it's usually done much earlier on in the decade. So he says they did this in 2021 already. So the fact that this is trying to be done again in the middle of the decade is where his biggest concern lies. To his defense, he was the only person that said something to that effect that I was like, okay, well, I can see why that would be bothersome, because if historically there's a certain time for this stuff to be done, well then yeah, his question would be, well, why now? Why in the middle of the decade? Why does it have to be done once again? But no other representative said that. Everybody else just sounded like they were just crying and they were having a temper tantrum. So in James's defense, I want to say I shout out to him for at least pointing that part out, because that was something that I said, oh, okay, so that if this was already done before, and it usually is done in the beginning of the decade, then sure. Like, I think that's a fair question. Why in the middle of the decade? Why, again, 3 years later after it was already done in 2021? Or 4 years later, rather.
Because this is not just a Texas problem, this affects the whole country.
So there is another consequence that's laid out in Texas state law that I know you're aware of, which are these fines of $500 a day. The deadline, the quorum call, is going to be in just about a few hours from now. And at that point onward, you and others are going to be fined $500 a day. Who is going to pay for that?
Well, I've said I'm willing to pay for those fines myself, and it won't be easy because I make $600 a month as a state legislator in Texas.
That's
before
ridiculous.
taxes. I have a day job where I am able to pay my bills and make ends meet. But I knew that I would have to face the consequences if I took this action. But I think it's necessary to protect the
Dude, I
democratic
gotta do
process.
further research on that. Is that a true number? Like, how does anybody? Well, I mean, he said he has a day job, but how is your salary $600 a month? Like, that's literally crazy. I mean, what is that? Like $7,000, $6,000 a year, or something like that? That's insane. That's literally insane.
$600 a month as a state legislator in Texas. That's before taxes. I have a day job where I am able to pay my bills and make ends meet. But I knew that I would have to face the consequences if I took this
And that's
action.
before
But I
taxes.
think it's necessary to protect the democratic process. We're here in the land of Lincoln, which is appropriate because Abraham Lincoln broke quorum as a state senator in 1840 by jumping out of the window of the Illinois state capitol. Thankfully,
Facts.
I didn't have to jump out of any windows. But I am participating, along with my colleagues, in a long American tradition of standing up to bullies, of civil disobedience, of good trouble. We need that now at this historic moment.
So, just to be clear, you say that these fines that could be thousands of dollars, you plan to pay for that yourself. Do you know if your other colleagues will be doing the same, paying for these out of pocket, or will they rely on benefactors and donor money?
I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I think we have been fortunate to have a flood of grassroots donations from across the state of Texas and honestly across the country that's helping us pay for food and travel and things that it takes to break quorum. This is not an easy thing to do. It's also not a decision we made lightly. Many of us are leaving behind those day jobs that I mentioned earlier. We're leaving behind our income. We're also leaving behind young kids in some cases. Some of my colleagues are leaving behind aging parents. And so there are personal, political, and financial costs to this quorum break, but it's necessary because what Donald Trump is doing is trying to rig the next election. He's trying to insulate himself from
I don't think
any
leaving your
accountability
family is
transactions.
necessary
That's
for
not
this,
the American
but
way.
okay.
It's not how this democracy is supposed to work.
So in this special session, there are about 2 weeks left. Do you plan to stay in Illinois for the entirety of those 2 weeks?
I plan on staying out of Texas for those 2 weeks, and that pains me. I'm an eighth generation Texan. I love my state more than anything. It's why I'm a state representative to help make Texas even better. And so to be gone from my family, from my state, is not a happy thing for me. But why I'm doing this is because the Republicans are trying to change the rules of the game midway through the decade. Typically, state legislators adjust district boundaries at the beginning of a decade to account for population changes after a new census. And Republicans in Texas did that in 2021. They passed a gerrymandered map when they were supposed to, and we didn't break quorum. But what's happening now is different. Trump is asking them to redraw those Texas maps in the middle of the decade to get him 5 more seats because he's worried about losing his majority in Congress next year in the midterms. So this is an extraordinary circumstance and it requires extraordinary action.
So you say that you, and I presume your Democratic colleagues as well, will stay out of Texas for those 2 weeks, meaning that there will be no floor activity on the floor of the State House of Representatives for those 2 weeks. And as you know, that means that there is other legislation that's going to be the victim of that. And that includes this bill for flood assistance for those Texans who were impacted by those devastating floods on July 4th. Are you concerned that all of this could ultimately be a mistake if that legislation also becomes a victim of this?
This is a Republican talking point. I'm concerned that Greg Abbott decided to play politics with flood victims and their families. The only emergency that we should be coming to the state capitol to address is flood mitigation and disaster prevention. That's what Texas wants to focus on. It's why my Democratic colleagues and I showed up on the first day of the special legislative session 2 weeks ago. We begged our Republican colleagues to prioritize flood victims and their families, and they refused.
But the reality is, Representative, the reality is the consequence of the decision, regardless of whether or not it's a talking point, is that this bill is not going to advance. Is that a bad thing if this bill doesn't advance?
And who put flood mitigation after redistricting on the agenda?
The Republicans, they control the floor.
Exactly.
They have made that decision.
Exactly.
But there will
And
be
we know
consequences
why.
to your decision here too, will there not?
It is, because y'all
And
won't be
you know
there.
why they did that is so that they could play politics with those flood victims, so they could pressure us to give away our constituents' voices in the democratic process. They're using flood victims to try to get us to agree to these corrupt maps so they can rig the next election. We are not willing to sacrifice the American experiment. We begged them to prioritize flood victims, and they refuse to do so. This is cynical politics at its worst. It is rock bottom for people like Greg Abbott and Donald Trump. Sadly, I've come to expect nothing less from them, but it is still immoral and disgusting and outrageous, and we should all reject it regardless of our political party.
Texas State Representative James Tallarico, thank you so much for your time. Next time you and I talk, we're going to talk about the possibility of you running for Senate in 2026, but not today. We had other things on the agenda. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
That's crazy. I don't want to say he deflected. That's why I say that James, that he articulates himself well. I won't say that he necessarily deflected there, but he did want to make the point of like, listen, it's not that we're willing to just kind of like overthrow the flood victims, but who put the flood victims second on the list? Like who put redistricting above them? You know, and the news anchor says he's like the Republicans. They control the House, and he's like, yeah, exactly. So I mean, but the news anchor still makes a great point when he says, yeah, but in your decision, in the decision that you are making and your constituents, there still will be consequences for that. Like the flood victims legislation may not pass, it may not advance, and is that a bad thing? James doesn't really answer that. He more so just points to the fact that hey, it's not going to get done because the Republicans decided to put redistricting above it. So I just think he makes a good point in the sense where he says it's not something we want to do, but we have to do it, and we shouldn't do it, but we're gonna do it, and we probably don't really have to do it, but we gotta do it, and it's that type of thing that I'm watching where I'm like, I don't know, James, I don't know if you should be on the Democrat side of this, but nonetheless, like this is what they believe. They believe that Donald Trump is doing this in the middle of the decade because he's trying to get seats so he doesn't lose the Senate. So if they have that in their minds and that's what they believe is happening, there's not anything that anybody's going to be able to do to stop them. They're just going to be convinced that that's what's happening. All right, so we're going to move over and now we're going to switch gears to more of the Russiagate Obama situation happening. Shout out to CNN source. Bondi orders grand jury probe into Obama officials over Russia investigation. This is not a small deal, a grand jury probe. You could spend a couple of years trying to prove your innocence, right? Even though you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. So let's take a listen.
A source told CNN that Attorney General Pam Bondi has directed federal prosecutors to launch a grand jury investigation into accusations that Obama officials manufactured intelligence about Russia's 2016 election interference. The grand jury could issue subpoenas or even pursue a potential indictment as part of a criminal investigation into allegations that Democratic officials tried to smear Donald Trump during his 2016 campaign by falsely alleging his campaign was colluding with the Russian government. Now, this follows a recent move from Trump's Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. She declassified documents that she alleged undermined the Obama administration's conclusion that Russia tried to help Trump defeat Hillary Clinton. Let's bring in CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. Ellie, what do prosecutors need to start or set up here? What's the process?
Yeah, Phil, so look, this is a big step forward because now we've moved from beyond the stage of reports and referrals and political statements into what appears to be an actual criminal investigation by the Justice Department. Now, traditionally, and I can't necessarily vouch or speak for this particular Justice Department because they've defied a lot of norms, but traditionally the burden to open a grand jury investigation is fairly low. It's not nothing. As a prosecutor, you have to have some basis to believe that a federal crime may have been committed. But Phil, now that there is a grand jury convened, that gives DOJ prosecutors enormous investigative powers. You already mentioned the two major things that grand juries can do. Number one is investigate. They can issue subpoenas. These are criminal subpoenas. They're essentially mandatory. You can challenge them, but they're typically upheld by courts. You can subpoena witnesses who will have to come in and give testimony in the grand jury. And then the second thing grand jurors can do, and we're down the line here, is ultimately vote to indict. That's how federal prosecutors obtain indictments. The burden is simply that you have to show probable cause that a crime was committed. It's a much lower burden than in order to show someone's guilt. So this is a major step forward in this investigation, potentially quite a precipitous one as well.
What do you think the likelihood of an indictment of somebody that maybe is well known to the American public would be in a situation like this?
Gosh, I have read Tulsi Gabbard's summaries and reports really carefully. I've tried to make sense of this, and I am not comprehending where the criminal theory comes in at all, frankly. Tulsi Gabbard's theory, which this started with a referral from Tulsi Gabbard over to DOJ, is essentially that Barack Obama or some of his officials were involved in falsifying intelligence around the 2016 election. But when you look at what the actual facts are, that simply does not appear to be true. The intelligence estimate at the time was that Russia was attempting to interfere in the 2016 election in Trump's benefit, and that they did that through persuasion, through taking out Facebook ads and that kind of thing. But the intelligence also showed there was no criminal conspiracy between Donald Trump and the Russians, and that there was no actual hacking to switch over votes in the systems. That intelligence has since been confirmed by the Senate Intelligence Committee, Republican-led, by DOJ itself through their Inspector General. So I'm not quite sure where I see a discrepancy there. Never mind B, Phil, a federal crime. I mean, we've heard terms like seditious conspiracy and treason. I'm not seeing anything close to that. And finally, Phil, I do have to note, all of this conduct would date back to 2016. Here we are 9 years later, the statute of limitations on most federal crimes is going to be 5 years. So
Yep.
I'm skeptical, but look, this is going to happen largely behind closed doors, and we'll see where it goes.
Ali Honig, always appreciate it, my friend. Thanks so much. With us now, our CNN senior political commentators, Van Jones and Scott Jennings. Van, I want to start with you. Your reaction to the move here by the Attorney General to move forward with a grand jury investigation.
Stunning, terrifying, and a waste of time. Look, I was in the Obama administration. The administration ahead of us was George W. Bush's administration. A lot of stuff that they did that we didn't like or we would have done differently or we thought was awful. But we never tried to criminally prosecute anybody. And so this doesn't make a lot of sense. What is the crime here? Apparently, they don't like that Russia was trying to mess with our elections. But the Obama administration didn't say that they successfully did it, didn't say that Trump participated in it. They just said the truth, which a bipartisan Senate panel also said, which is the Russians tried to mess with our election. Now, Donald Trump has just not been able to let this go. He feels badly about it. But just because you feel badly about something or you don't like something the last administration did, doesn't mean somebody should go to prison. If that happens, that's a completely different world that we're living in. But we can't even figure out what is a criminal charge supposed to be here.
Yeah, I would note, and it was a long time ago, and we're all getting older, except for Scott, of course. I believe the Obama administration and Attorney General Eric Holder took a lot of heat for not pursuing criminal cases against people involved in allegations of torture when they came in from the Bush administration. Scott, what's your take on what we've seen transpire in the last couple hours?
Well, I think we're downplaying what's been found. And, with respect to my sparring partner here, Van, half the country and one entire political party has an article of faith that Russia stole the 2016 election. Now, how did they come to that conclusion? They came to that conclusion because high-ranking Democrats, many of whom had intelligence titles that were bestowed upon them in the Obama administration, spent a lot of time and effort making an entire political party believe that. If you went to a Democratic fundraising dinner or political dinner tonight and got asked the question, did Russia steal the election? And you said no, you'd be booed off the stage. And so I think you're downplaying what has actually happened here. One party and half the country believes an election was stolen, and that did not happen by accident. There's evidence here. A grand jury look at it, and if it's as clean and mundane as you say, then these people ought to have nothing to worry about. But why shouldn't we look into it? The people who complain about misinformation and disinformation all the time, why does half the country believe something that didn't happen?
Well, half the country believes a lot of dumb stuff, including lots of dumb stuff that comes from Republicans, but nobody's trying to put anybody in prison over it. Listen, we live in a
They tried to put Donald Trump in jail, man.
Hold on a second. They tried to put Donald Trump in jail over stuff that he got indicted for, but the country went ahead and reelected him anyway. Look, my point is this. It is in fact the case. People believe a lot of wacky stuff and nutty stuff in my party and in your party. That is very different from the Department of Justice saying they're going to put somebody in prison over it. That's a different world. We've not been in a world before. Listen, you served in the White House. I served in the White House. The idea you're going to somehow now go to jail because people misinterpreted what you did in there, I think is very, very scary stuff, man.
Scott?
Look, I mean, we're obviously going to see this differently, and you and I have agreed about many things regarding the last few years, but on this, my view is that it has become obvious that what happened as Donald Trump was coming in and Barack Obama was going out bears some amount of investigation. And again, if you're right, all these people, they should have nothing to worry about. But there's a lot of people out there that have looked at this and decided that, intelligence was changed and ignored, and there were career people in the intelligence services saying we can't use the Steele dossier and so on and so forth. So at some point, people are just asking, how do you get accountability? Why does half the country believe Russia stole an election?
Yeah,
where's the accountability for that? Did people abuse their positions? Did they perjure themselves? Did they willfully mislead the American people? How do you get accountability for it? That's the question.
Scott, can I ask you, is this, in your eyes, this would be the final judgment on that? It wasn't the Durham report, it wasn't the Senate Intelligence Committee run by Marco Rubio report, it wasn't the House and Senate efforts in the last 6-7 years to look into this. This is the final one. After this, you'll believe whatever it is?
Well, I mean, I would think so. I mean, typically, an investigation like this from the justice system would be the end of the line. I mean, you'll find out whether anybody did commit criminal acts or not. And again, I don't know whether they did or they didn't. And so if Van is right and everything was above board and this was all just mundane policy differences, then I don't know why anybody would be worried about having their actions scrutinized. It seems to me that a hit dog hollers. And right now, the hit dogs are hollering. And I'm just telling you, enough has come forward for Republicans to believe that this bears a little bit more investigation.
Well, we just see it differently. And listen, a grand jury that's not a little rock. That is somebody dropping a refrigerator on you if it comes through. And then you can spend 2 or 3 years.
I know. Donald Trump knows.
Well, you can spend 2 or 3 years just proving that you're innocent, and you spend a whole bunch of money. And why are we doing this? It's damn near, I don't know how many hundreds of years later. I mean, the last like 6 months, it felt like 700 years. So I don't understand. Tulsi Gabbard has not put forward any allegation that is criminal, and here we are. And by the way, this is all a part of a whole series of things that Donald Trump has done, even this past couple of weeks. It just seems like he is just going to abuse every little bit of power that he has to go after people he doesn't like. He's snatching stuff out of the Smithsonian. He's doing all kinds of stuff, none of which is making America any better, none of which is making anybody's grocery bills go down. A lot of this stuff just seems like he's just petty white or petty wop or whatever. He just is the most petty president we've ever had. Can we just get on with getting the price of groceries down? What it's supposed to be running?
All I'm going to say, beyond my appreciation for both of you, and I think you know that quite well, Jennings, you were lucky we didn't get into the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because I was going to welcome you into my Thunderdome, my friend, and it was not going to be pretty.
Fine.
So mark that down. We're going to get there eventually.
Why are the job numbers wrong every month? Why are the job numbers wrong
No.
every month?
You don't get to do
Why are
it
they
again.
wrong
I don't have
every
any more
month?
time. You don't get to do that. You don't get to start that. That was my fault. Okay, I will take.
If you were that wrong, you'd be out of your job too, because you're usually right, so it's okay.
Look at that. Van Jones, Scott Jennings, I appreciate you both very much as always. Thanks, guys.
Shout out to them. I mean, hey, they make a good. Scott makes a good point, right? He says, listen, if there's nothing to actually worry about and nobody didn't do anything, what's the big deal about the investigation, right? There'll be nothing to find, And Van Jones says it's horrific, it's ridiculous, and a waste of time all at once. I think those are very interesting choice of words coming from Van Jones, but nonetheless, that's the way that he goes about it. Listen, we know Van Jones could be left-leaning. I don't hate Van Jones. Some commentary he does I can't appreciate, but for the most part, I would say, especially after post the 2024 presidential debate, he was extremely emotional. I felt bad. I was like, okay, man, you might need to take the day off, sir. He was pretty emotional, but nonetheless, Scott makes a good point. If there is nothing going on and there's nothing to worry about, Donald Trump knows about this level of prosecution and being subpoenaed to court over and over again and having to pay for things and constantly defend himself and prove that he's innocent, right? And as if he's already guilty. He knows what that feels like, but Van kind of downplays that, and he just kind of forgets that. He graciously and willingly forgets the point where we were all watching President Trump constantly being dragged into court. Literally what I thought was over things that were ridiculous. Anything that they could find, they were dragging this guy into court. All right, guys, so we're going to switch gears and we're going to go over to Mr. Bill O'Reilly. Shout out to Bill O'Reilly. He says, what is Kamala Harris talking about? Bill O'Reilly blasts the former VP and Stephen Colbert. Let's take a listen.
So Kamala Harris goes on Colbert on Friday night, okay? And the stats are unbelievable for Colbert. I mean, it's incredible. Colbert, according to Newsbusters, which is conservative but pretty accurate, has hosted 177 left-wing guests, and one was not a liberal. That was the congressman from Wyoming, ex-congressman Cheney, who hates Trump. It is Cheney. And that's it. So if you are not a fervent liberal, you can't get on Colbert. And he openly rooted for Kamala Harris to be president. And he was the only one of the late night shows, Kimmel, Myers, Fallon, Colbert, Daily Show, 99% of all the guests so far this year have been liberal. Is that unbelievable?
Yeah, that's kind of
Really,
crazy.
think about it.
That's crazy.
So it's like censorship. It's a blackout of any opposing points of view.
Yeah.
Okay. So Kamala shows up, and she's not going to run for governor of California. I was wrong. I thought she would. A relatively young woman. I don't know why she's hanging it up, but she's not. And
Election was horrible.
she goes on there, and she says some pretty interesting things. Roll the tape.
I know you're not here to say I told you so. But would you like to?
But let me just say this. You are correct that I did predict a lot of it. But Stephen, what I did not predict was the capitulation. I didn't predict that.
It will roll over for this president.
I didn't see that. I didn't see that coming. And perhaps it's naive of me, someone who has seen a lot that most people haven't seen, but I believed that on some level, you know, there should be many who consider themselves to be guardians of our system and our democracy who just capitulated. And I didn't see that coming.
So I'm going, what is she talking about? I don't know, my rights in the last 6 months haven't been violated. Have yours? And if they have, I want to know about it. Bill at BillO'Reilly.com, name in town, Bill at BillO'Reilly.com. So what is she talking about? The guardians of freedom or the Constitution? I don't know. Now, a decent interviewer would have said, well, can you give me an example of something you're very surprised at? Madam Vice President.
Right.
Yeah, journalism 101.
Journalism 101.
And then the seals in the audience. Okay. Yeah, I'm being a little mean to Colbert and the seals in the audience, but they deserve it. Because when you have somebody like that, Harris, who's basically saying, hey, Trump is violating all of our rights, and he's dismantling the Constitution. Okay? Give me some examples.
Yeah, give an example.
Can you? I don't think she could, Kamala Harris. And then she went on to say what a great job Joe Biden did. Ooh. So if you're reading my book, Confronting the Presidents, you know that I believe that Biden's the second worst president in the history of the Republic. And not everybody agrees with me. Some people think he's the first worst, but he's not. James Buchanan, he's got that, and he'll never give it up. So if you're interested, you read the book, you'll see he was the president before Lincoln, the Civil War.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you have a woman there sitting on a couch with Colbert, who's an ardent liberal, and he uses his so-called comedy show or variety show, whatever you want to call it, to promote the Democratic Party and liberal cause. That's what Colbert does, and that's why he's not successful. That's why his show loses a lot of money, and that's why CBS canceled. CBS didn't cancel it because Donald Trump did it. They canceled it and said, is it worth it? Okay, is it worth it? Keep the guy on, blacking out all opposing points of view, and he's losing. He didn't lose 40, that was the press number. 20, 25 million they're losing over there, but that's a lot of jack.
Yeah, that's a lot.
At CBS lately. And they can make it up by expanding newscasts or using reruns or what. They can make money. Okay, but let's get back to Harris, because Harris got 75, 76 million votes to be president of this country. But I've always said, I had never, all the time that I followed her and analyzed her, it was all generalities and never, hey, that Trump, that SOB is doing this, all right? And this is going to lead to that. This is not what our founding fathers had intended. You know, a little surgery. She's got writers, she's got people to do it, never does it. And to think that Biden, with all of the massive problems that he created, not didn't solve, created the border problem. That was an executive order that opened that border. Okay? He surrendered in Afghanistan. He didn't consult with Congress about that. Billions of dollars worth of weaponry went to the Taliban. Are you kidding me? He did that. And I can go on and on. In fact, I wrote a column called A Cup of Joe on BillO'Reilly.com that runs down all the constitutional violations that the Biden-Harris administration participated in.
Yeah,
Now, I'm
Hakeem
an
Jeffrey
open-minded
says
guy.
this
Some
is the
people
most
believe that, but it's true.
incompetent.
If you see something that Donald Trump has done to threaten our freedoms and our Constitution, please let me know. Again, Bill at BillO'Reilly.com. And I'll use it. I'll read it, and if you don't want your name out there, I won't put it out. But I'm very interested in it. Homeowners, when is the last time you checked on your home title? If your answer is never, then this is for you. Scammers are stealing titles, and your equity lock.com, promo code HILL. So Trump is basically a guy who is trying to run the country from a transactional point of view. That's what he's trying to do. He doesn't care about ideology. He's not Rush Limbaugh. All right, he's not. He's not even a Republican. My God. He was a Democrat until he switched because he knew that was the pathway in, because his appeal was going to be to people who were traditional.
Right.
He doesn't like the woke stuff. He doesn't want the DEI. He doesn't want all this doctrine.
Yeah, he doesn't like
And now he hates the left. He didn't hate the left in 2016. Remember, I had the first interview with Trump when he announced being president. He was going to run. I had the first one. Okay? He was more
left-leaning,
concentrating on his opponents, Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, than he was on the left wing. That wasn't even his mind, but they attacked him so savagely.
Yep, he didn't hate them.
The left wing, now he hates them.
Yeah.
Now it's personal. Okay? Even Hillary Clinton, after he defeated Hillary Clinton, he had a very nice phone call with him, and very complimentary, and it wasn't what it turned out to be. Now that Hillary Clinton, the evidence is mounting that she was behind that whole phony Russian collusion thing. But, you know, people think that she's going to get charged and Obama's going to get charged and all this. Long way away from that.
Yeah.
Possible, and I'll get into that more down the road when more evidence surfaces.
Yeah.
But you can't do hearsay and you can't do opinion when you present indictments in front of a grand jury. Federal grand jury wants proof.
Yeah.
They want to see the evidence, not you think or,
Yeah.
you know, because Hillary Clinton could say, I don't know anything about it, my staff did it. I don't know. You know? So, I mean, I'm just giving you the devil's advocate here. And a lot of conservatives get really, oh, we're going to get Hillary, we're going to get Barack Obama. No, wait a minute.
Necessarily, yep.
Whistleblower comes out, whole different ballgame. But you need somebody. But anyway, getting back to Kamala Harris. You know, I have nothing against the woman. I thank God she's not president of the United States. As bad as some people think Trump is, Trump is really trying to change the economy in this country. And he's handled Iran well. I think he's going to get a deal with China. All right? Kamala Harris, I had zero confidence because she never, ever gets specific about anything.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your YouTube bonus. We'll be back later on this week. Thank you for
Shout
watching.
out to Bill O'Reilly. And you know, he's not off with when he says that. When he says that she was never really specific about anything. There were, I don't want to even say there were a couple of people because then I would be downplaying it. There were a lot of people that, because of that specific reason, especially men, that Kamala Harris just wasn't pulling many people. They just didn't like that. Why do you think, like, the phrase word salad is so connected with her. Because literally, like, she would go to explain something and people would be like, what is she talking about? Like, why isn't she answering the question, right? We want to be unburdened by what we've been burdened by. Like, these are the things people remember her for and not much else. All right, guys, so here we're going to go second to the last clip of the live stream. We got WION News. We have JD Vance surging ahead in Republican Party's 2028 nomination race. Let's take a listen.
All right, Donald Trump is serving his last term as the President of the United States of America, and the question of his succession is now buzzing in the Republican Party as to who will be the one to take the baton from Donald Trump. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has put his weight behind U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. In an interview with Lara Trump, Rubio said J.D. Vance would be a great presidential nominee.
You are talked about quite frequently as a possible contender in 2028. Do you have your sights set outside of the State Department?
Well, I think J.D. Vance would be a great nominee, and if you know, I think if he decides he wants to do that, and so you know, and I think he's doing a great job as vice president. He's a close friend, and I hope he intends to.
But when he was pushed to speak about his own presidential ambitions, Rubio deflected the idea and the question, saying that he is completely focused on his role as Secretary of State and wants to serve as long as the president allows. Through to the end of this term in 2028, Rubio may have fallen shy from hinting at his own presidential ambitions, but 54-year-old Secretary of State has already tried his luck for the top job. In 2016, Rubio led a full-fledged presidential run in Republican primaries, but failed to secure presidential nomination back then. According to the poll from Emerson College, Vance is leading against most Democratic front-runners for 2028. Against former Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, Vance is a...
That's crazy. So if it were JD and Pete Buttigieg, JD has 44, Pete has 43.
Ahead with 44%, with 1% setting both apart. Against California Governor as well, Gavin Newsom, 45% say that
JD and Gavin Newsom, 45% for JD, 42% for Gavin Newsom.
They would support Vance,
wow, so
while
it's actually
42% of the percent, with
it's 1%
1%
lower.
setting both apart.
1% more people are supporting Pete Buttigieg over Gavin Newsom.
Against California Governor as well, while 42% of the respondents said that they will vote for Newsom. Against Representative Alexandria Ocasio.
This I thought was nuts, but the gap, it's not a huge gap, but it's a huger gap compared to everyone else that was on the Democratic side. But if it's JD Vance and AOC, JD has 44%, AOC has 41%. So that's a 3% gap.
44% back Vice President JD Vance and 41% back Ocasio-Cortez. Well, JD Vance is expanding his footprint in Trump administration from Jeffrey Epstein case to the big beautiful bill. Vance is Trump's trusted firefighter right now, going beyond the traditional duties of a vice president and playing an active role in the administration. But the race of Trump's succession is far from settled, as new leaders can throw their hat at any point leading to 2028 presidential primaries. As of now, it remains to be seen who will be tasked to help the Republican Party secure the second consecutive presidential term after George W. Bush. And to more on this, we're now being joined live on Race to Power by Eugene Craig III. He's a political analyst and he's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Welcome back to Race to Power, Mr. Craig. First up, of course, how do you read the latest coming in from Washington, D.C., where Rubio has clearly backed J.D. Vance as the front runner of the 2028 presidential polls?
The thing is, it's way too early for anybody to be backing anybody, but Marco Rubio is doing the smart thing to preserve his current job and not outshining the master, right? Naturally, you would think that J.D. Vance would be the front runner, being that he's the sitting vice president and Donald Trump is termed out, come after this current presidential term. But one more time, you know, Marco Rubio very well could still run for president himself again. And, we also know that Donald Trump likes to fire people, especially once they start to outshine he and those around him. So Mark Rubio did the proper thing and threw his weight behind what will be the presumptive nominee. But as we know, with primaries, anything can happen at any time. But as of right now, J.D. Vance would be considered the presumptive nominee, and Mark Rubio did the right thing to say that he backs the presumptive nominee.
All right, we'll stop it right there. I will agree with him. J.D. Vance would be presumed as the presumptive nominee. I mean, historically, there's no support that the vice president always wins. It's actually the opposite. So historically, yes, the vice president has won after the sitting president, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it actually works against them because it depends on how the sitting president ran their administration. So if they suck, their vice president probably is not going to win, which is what we saw with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris historically. That's how it actually has worked out. There's actually only been a couple of cases where the VP has won and taken it and not allowed the other party to succeed. But give me one moment, guys. I need to figure out which clip I was gonna play for you guys. Gen Z, the most Christian generation, Christian Israel, 60%. Okay, it was this one with Charlie Kirk.
Is Gen Z the most Christian?
Okay, yeah, because they were talking about music in this one. All right, so we got shout out to Cliff Buell. Often over here we try to end the live stream with a Christian clip from Cliff. If it's not from Cliff, it's usually from a different YouTube content creator. Most nights I do end the live stream with a Christian clip. Some nights I don't always include it. It just depends on how the night goes and how many clips we have. But nonetheless, tonight's topic is Christian music is top of the charts. Gen Z is the most Christian generation. Probably not, more like maybe they stream the most music, but let's take a look at what Cliff covered.
Is Gen Z the most Christian generation we've had in a long time? Watch this.
For the first time, multiple Christian musicians are charting on the Billboard Hot 100 at the same time and staying there for weeks. Gen Z is becoming more Christian. In fact, the most Christian generation in quite some time. What is causing this? The 60% global increase in Christian music streams over the last 5 years. Al?
I think it's the increase in an interest in meaning and fulfillment and specifically Christianity in the satisfaction that Jesus Christ brings, but also Christian artists are making really good music. And so I'm just so thankful to see this collision of awesome talent and a desire to glorify God.
Honestly, praise God that people are starting to listen to things that aren't degenerate and awful and ugly and shallow.
Gen Z.
Yeah, I wanna look that clip up and see how long ago Charlie and Allie did that clip. But you know what? I would agree with them when I say like praise God. Really good music, some of it. I think Christian artists have gotten a lot smarter. I like the way that they can sound, believe this or not, because some people aren't gonna like this, and I can get some flack from this, especially from the Christian side of things. But that's cool. I'm cool with sitting in those spaces of tension. But I like when Christian artists are able to sound like kind of secular artists, but the message behind the music is really good, and I can appreciate that. That's how they infiltrate, right? You got to be smart about this. You got to be smart about it, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. People try to make it seem like, oh, you're trying to sound too much like the world, and it's just like, I don't know if they're trying to sound like the world if the lyrics don't sound like the lyrics belong to the world. Now that could just be because like different locations in the United States listen to music for different reasons, right? In New York, we like lyrics, right? Down south, they like the beat. So for me, what the artist is saying matters a lot. I've listened to things by D1, by Tripley, by Lecrae. I've listened to these things, and it's like these guys make really dope music. To the point where like that new thing that Lecrae got out with Jackie Hill Perry, both of their lines were crazy. There was something else recently that I was just listening to that I was just like, dude, it's just John Keith's song, this recent song that he has out that I've been listening to a lot. And literally, if I look it up on YouTube, it's probably gonna come up in my recents because I'm always listening to it. John Keith Won't Fly. Yeah. That, I've listened to John Keith for a couple of years, so I like a couple of songs by him. Usually if I go on YouTube and find a music video, I know it by his outfit, because he could be pretty flamboyant in the way he dresses, but because I like fashion, I can appreciate that. But I've been listening to his new song a lot, and I've listened to his music for some time. So I actually can appreciate when Christian artists can do this, and that is one reason why I think Christian music streams are up 60% because the music, like they're able to infiltrate it. They're able to actually sound like probably the world's one of the world's most liked secular artists, but the message is about Jesus. I think it's masterful, right? So some people hate it. You know, some people are like, oh, this belongs too much to the world. And it's like, well, you know, that's fine. That's your opinion. I don't think that that's the case there. I think that that's the reason why Christian music streaming is up by 60%, and mainly with Gen Z, because they're actually listening to the music and they're like, oh, I like this. And then the next thing you know, they're like, wow, this song is actually about Jesus. I can't tell you how many songs I listened to as a kid growing up. And then when I actually listened to the lyrics as an adult, I was like, oh, this is a Christian song. So yeah, I think it's masterful what they're doing. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream there. We will be back. I can't say tomorrow because it's past midnight, in a couple of hours. So with that being said, guys, take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Love yourselves. Love one another. Be peaceful. Peace.